Welcome to the Liberated Equestrian Podcast and community. This is a place for horsewomen to experience belonging, breakthrough, and becoming. I'm your host, Lisa Pulliam, founder of StableMinded.us, mental health professional, second season equestrian, and author of Finding Calm, helping riders navigate through fear and anxiety. The Liberated Equestrian is devoted to the mission of being set free and experiencing breakthroughs in every aspect of our horsemanship and humanship. This is all about mind, body, heart, and soul care for ourselves, our horses, and the people we do life with, so that we can grow together as a community of emotionally and relationally healthy horsewomen. So find a comfortable spot, take a deep breath, and let's embark on this journey of becoming liberated equestrians together. Welcome to the podcast, Kendra. I'm so glad to have you with us today. And I would love to just kind of get started with this conversation by having you share a little bit about yourself, like what led you into this horse world and what is filling your life with that today.
Yeah. So I was like your quintessential 10-year-old kid that was like, Mom, I want lessons. I want lessons. And she, was fed that passion, ended up getting lessons from somebody who ultimately basically became my neighbor. My first trainer ever, Kim, in her backyard, to which day, I still talk to her. She was at my wedding. She became my horse mom, and we're 20 years deep into a relationship. So I just kind of sparked it with her, learning lots of things about centered riding. And, she really instilled some very horse first ethics into me. There was always, checking in with how I was for the day. And she was doing some of the kind of therapeutic riding spin on things that I didn't know as a 10-year-old, but she helped me through so much of, my adolescent life and whatnot. And she really, encouraged me to explore everything. So I started with dressage with her. And then I went to a local barn and did 100 jumpers and reining and bought my first horse, and then sadly lost him sooner than any of us would have ever wanted. Then I got my second horse and, did a little bit of everything with him. I kind of just kept playing, and, I did 4-H, and I did, I tried reining and cattle work with him, but he would groom the cows instead of chasing them. And, I never wanted to get rid of my reining saddle that I still have, and did it in college. And then basically in school, I went to Del Valle College, now university. And that's where the biomechanics thing started to really click with me. I took some biomechanics classes, and then I did a semester abroad at Hartbury College in England. And by the time I was over there, I think we got there in January, and by February, I was like, Mom, I don't want to leave. So, and she was, incredibly supportive. And she said, okay, well, if you want to stay, you have to find a job. And I found a job working with a woman, Louise Davison, who is absolutely amazing. She's, my Kim in England. And, I was visited her last July and October when I was over there for, visiting friends that I have from my, adventure at Hartbury. And that really changed my life. With Louise, I was really lucky that I did an interview with her, and immediately she was like, okay, when do you come and, come to the farm? And then I remember one day she's like, pack the lorry, we're going to Carl's. And I'm like, what do you mean Carl's? And she's like, Carl. And I'm like, Carl Hester? And she's like, what other Carl would it be? So I immediately stepped into this big leagues of FEI. Conrad Schumacher would come. I think he was there for 2 or 3 1 week long type trips. So I got to ride with him. I went out to dinner and the movies with Sandy Phillips and Louise's kids. I got to do these amazing things and learn a lot about biomechanics and just, what the FEI world is like. And then I came back over to the US to, finish school. My mom was like, you have to finish undergrad. And I got a job here in the FEI world. Saw some things and kind of didn't know where I wanted to be, and sadly lost my horse, who I'd had at the time for 9 years. He was my everything. He wasn't super tragically lost. It was like a slow burn over a course of a couple months, but it was, of course, unexpected at 12 years old. And I didn't really know where I wanted to be in the horse world. So I kind of used grad school as an excuse to reset. I wasn't happy. I didn't like some of the things that I was seeing and kind of being involved with. So I took grad school as my opportunity. And through that, I did a lot of coursework on my business. My teachers were super, super supportive. And I did a competitor analysis on basically like Bucks County, Hunterdon County, and saw that, yes, there's a lot of accomplished and, very well-established and like highly acclaimed type FEI trainers. I looked mainly in dressage, but nobody was talking biomechanics. And this was about 2015. And I was exposed with centered riding, kind of got sparked by one of the teachers at Del Val, Steph Barbera, to do the course, and through a clinic that was hosted there. And then through all the connections in England, I saw that people were talking about Franklin method and these, kind of different modalities that had no standing in the US yet, really. And I actually took a lesson, like one of my first like big exposed to the Franklin balls lessons was with a physical therapist, Danielle Shugard, who is like, I'm going out to dinner with her on Sunday. Like she's now a close friend. And she was kind of like, you got to do this. Like this ball stuff works. And, she was doing a different spin as well. So I like ran with it, and I'm a part of the first graduating class for all 4 pieces to Franklin method. And I just was amazing to see like how when we put the rider first, the horses just blossom. And, through my business, I made it so that my brand mantra, which was a class I had to, project I had to do, I came up with mindful riders create successful horses. And I really stuck with that if you are paying attention to what you're doing and aware, and the challenge is sometimes you're not even aware that our little subconscious brain thinks that, I'm standing straight, but we can all see that I'm crooked. And like, it's nobody's fault that they can't realize that. They just need help on the ground. They need a talkative mirror and somebody that's got a different spin than heels down, shoulders back. How do you activate the glute to support your heel or things like that? So I kind of just like went and solved a lot of my problems. I have bad feet. I have a busted shoulder. I recently had a neck injury and a concussion. And like the joke, I was teaching a workshop recently and I'm like, well, somebody asked me, how did I get into this? And I'm like, the joke is that I did it for myself, but realized that you guys will all pay me money. So like, and nobody was talking about it. So that's like my long-winded response to how did I get here?
I would call it the short, long wind, which really isn't a true thing, but it's helpful because what I heard you describe was that you were a horse girl with an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah. And it's like, that's totally like, I credit my family to that. My brothers each own a business. My dad owned a business. Like there's definitely like that little bug in our brain that is like, I want to work for myself. I want to be able to make the decisions. And, I don't want to have to bend my ethics to an employer or disagree. That I want the ability to say, hey, no, client, I don't agree with that. And I'm not endorsing that. And you can either stay with me or there's the door, and I'm okay with either answer. So I think that was the ethics really, really is what drives this.
Yeah. And, through us connecting me. So I watched your expo. Let me give context. People are listening to this all over the world. Both of us reside in Pennsylvania. You're in Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah. I live in Pennsylvania and the horses currently live in New Jersey.
Okay. So because the border is there, and that's the way that is, right? So we are both in Pennsylvania, and in the Northeast where we are located, it is high eventing, dressaging. We're near Devon, if that means anything to anybody. Maryland 4-star for eventing is not far from us. And so we're kind of in this world of what I call more formal competitive riding. But just on the borders of that is also like this really casual kind of backyard people too. And an hour from me is like Western riding culture. And so I met you for the first time at the Horse World Expo that takes place in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And you did a presentation that I watched, and I guess this was 2 years ago. And I was like, wow, she's talking about what's happening in the body. And I have had so many physical issues. I have a connective tissue disorder. So I have EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I've had numerous injuries, and I've worked with so many physical therapists, and I'm pretty self-aware of where my alignment and strength is on and off. So I was so intrigued by what you presented. A year ago, I had already been introduced to the Franklin method, which I think is something we should, unpack a little bit more. But in that, I've attended one of your local clinics, and we've had chance to talk a little bit more. I know that some of the issue in this space in the US is the ethics, and it is um, there's a certain way to do things, and there's a certain way that you need to keep quiet about things. And there's a tension in the horse space if you express a different voice or a different technique, and a lot of resistance. And what I have found, even through my curriculum, finding calm and working with horsewomen, is that they get like a gut and a sense of how they need to solve the problem, but they're in a power differential with their trainers or their particular barn that is like not open to exploring that avenue. And so then they stay stuck, their horse stays stuck, they lose their joy, and they start to unravel. And I know that this is something that you have felt
Oh
through our
yeah.
conversations and have seen. So I would love for you to kind of talk a little bit about that, because you even mentioned that, like you saw things you didn't want to see, and
Yeah.
that sent you in a new trajectory. Tell us as much as you feel like you want,
Yeah.
and what that means in the context of being a liberated equestrian as we think about speaking to all sorts of different ages and stages of riders in all different kind of spaces.
Yeah. So kind of like my own personal journey, like I will fully admit that I was that, kid in high school that I won a lot. My horse was exceptional. I worked my butt off to create him into a horse that I'm extremely proud of. And, in college, I was probably deemed cocky, and I probably earned that at times of, I was on at any point I was on 2 to 3 of the riding teams. Dressage, I was placing well. Western, there was, one year I was basically undefeated. Like I was kind of that show brat that was like, if I don't get, first, second, or third, I'm not keeping the ribbon, because why do I need to keep it? And then I, went over to England and just got exposed to things, came back over here and saw how people were just kind of like slamming horses up levels. It could apply to any discipline. Because I graduated college with a job offer in a reining barn and a dressage barn. So like I could pick which avenue I wanted, luckily. And I was really, really, sometimes I would say luck, but like a lot of times I did put the hard work in and the sacrifices. But I saw that, like, especially in the show world, like we're just going up the levels just to say, I have this medal or I won at this thing. And it got to the point where I was seeing horses just like, we wouldn't push another athlete to that level and, ignore this little pain intricacy or that thing. And like, we have horses that are quote sound, but are they performancely sound? Are they sound enough to go from third level to fourth level? Are they sound enough to, at this now stage of what I know, like let's say, the half pass, there's the swing leg and the stabilizing leg. And if the stabilizing leg isn't stabilizing enough, but the swing leg is beautiful and it's going to score me an 8. Yeah, but the stabilizing leg is going to destroy your horse's thoracic sling because they just can't can't stabilize for that amount of movement in the swing leg. So I kind of, that's a little like the deep dive of where my brain always goes. So I kind of just like had a switch in my brain where I was like, why do I care to be showing at this level by this age? And, I wanted my silver medal by the time I was 30. And, I saw that, yeah, I could sit on other people's horses that were at this level, but I'm like, I want to produce my horse to be at this level or that level. And like, to no discredit of any of the trainers that have their dressage medals or anything like that, like do your own journey to fulfill your life however you want. I realized that the medals didn't fulfill me. What actually fulfills me is, having that client come to me. Like I had this little adorable thoroughbred mare that came to me with this kind of like weird back injury thing, but it wasn't kissing spine. And like we did some x-rays and I, have a phenomenal lameness vet, Dr. Kyle Clarke from Mid-Atlantic, who like he flat out knows that he's a huge aspect of my success. I tell him it. But like, she was getting like kind of written off, this mare, Ella. And I was like, we did some x-rays and we saw that she had an old injury that was probably from a saddle tree. And her saddle, I used to work for a saddle fitter, doesn't matter the brand, it wasn't shaped properly, it wasn't built properly, it should have been rejected in manufacturing. Why hadn't anybody noticed along the many eyes on it and the many professionals? So I flat out said, like, that saddle, like, burn it for all I care. Like, it's not, the panels aren't made properly. I think this is causing part of the issues. And we just took the time to sort out this mare, and like, she was doing lovely. And I still have her in training. She's goofy and puts a little bit of stress on her mom and I, that she likes to have no self-preservation in the field. So I'm learning constantly about new and creative ways horses can put themselves on stall rest, sadly. But it's just like, the average adult amateur woman that just wants to do right by her horse, but the horse is a little sticky to the right turn. Why? Most, a lot of trainers, I'm not going to say most, because there's the industry is changing and for the better, in my opinion. But, most trainers, some trainers would say, we'll just kick her, just pull her, like, make her go to the right. Well, no, like, this mare has something going on. It's the injury is on the left side of her. Yes, it takes some money and some resources and some time. And I'm by no means a vet, by no means a physical therapist, but it's like the physical therapy spin towards the horses and the riders just makes them blossom. And, I use that word a lot. So I just kind of saw it in many sides of the industry where it's like, I'm not going to kick and pull a horse around. I'm not going to squawk at a rider to, actually, a prime example for myself. I have a busted shoulder. My young horse, my mom let me buy a 3-year-old when I was 13, which I do not endorse, but he taught me a lot. And he would take off on the lunge line constantly, and he just slowly ripped away at my shoulder. And basically 15 years later, through my schooling, I realized that I severely damaged my serratus anterior, and that's probably why my shoulder wings out. And I've had so many trainers over the years tell me shoulders back. Well, that didn't do anything to fix the problem, because my serratus anterior isn't working. And, a lot of people don't even know what that muscle is. It's, part of what holds your scapula in place. So I wanted to like solve my own problem of that. And luckily, I was literally assigned that muscle in my coursework for my final project. And so that's what's like really cool to kind of tie back into like what we said earlier about like diving into Franklin method. Franklin method is all about me as the practitioner knowing an insane amount of anatomy. So I need to know what is the serratus and how does it interact with your rib cage and your scapula and all the other supporting muscles. I'm in a Franklin method course currently, and we spent 3 6-hour days talking about the knee and just like the knee joint, basically. And it's so complicated, but once you as the practitioner understand it and can make it into biteable pieces, I have many clients on the simulator or not that we spent, half an hour talking about the knee. And then I get a text message a couple days later saying, oh my God, my horse took off with me and I actually slid my knee and felt so much more secure and understood it. And I feel more confident and whatnot. And it's like really cool with this anatomy based learning that I have that, I had a rider who was super shut down in her left hip, but it was because her right toe was just jacked up and jammed into her boot and couldn't move. So the body is a series of straight lines, diagonals, and spirals. And it's my job a little bit to like guess where's the symptom, where's the diagnosis, and like play with all these modalities that I've, acquired and little tools and tricks that if I can dream it between my mom and my husband, they can make it for me. And just so that people can feel. And I think that's what too, like I did a lot of riding with trainers where it was just about like, get the task done. I did have a trainer in high school that she said, we want to be feeling, thinking riders. And that stuck with me. I was there for, many, many years. And with that, it's like, I felt like the industry was getting away and being like thinking, producing, and like, if you weren't showing, why were you doing this? And it's like, well,
Mhm.
no, there's so many more adult amateur women or riders, men too,
Mhm.
that want to go trail riding or just enjoy their horse.
Mhm.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
that's the market that fulfills me more than like, yeah, I do show and I, show with my clients, but that's all the product of all the hard work that we put in the barn, and like the center line or whatever show ring that you go in is just your like check-in point to see
Mhm.
what's up versus getting that first place. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you've had a real shift from
Yeah.
this idea of my destination is a medal, a prize,
Yeah.
an event, to what's the process to get there, and
Yeah.
really choosing an ethical direction of like, how do I help the horse and help the rider, whether it's me or somebody else. And it shaped you. And I remember one of the clinics I went to, you did a private with a gal that was struggling, and I watched you take, um, I think it's important to understand this. So Franklin Method uses these inflatable tools, these balls, or different shaped things, and you put it under the rider's, seat bone on one side to try to help that rider straighten up a little bit. But you also addressed like, why might your pelvis be locked up,
Yeah.
right? And as an equine assisted therapist, when I get into mounted work with a rider, I'm looking at those same things that you're looking at, right? So in my work, what ends up happening, they the client doesn't get the opportunity typically to be on the back of a horse without having developed a relationship on the ground and
Yeah.
knowing their window of tolerance. So if that horse is super sensitive, what level of pressure can they handle when you're on them? And what's the finest tuning to their aids, essentially, so that there's good conversation from the minute the rider gets onto the back of the horse. And then we usually typically use like a bareback pad, and somebody's leading the horse. So the client is just there on the back of the horse being led, and I'm talking to them about their
Mhm.
body and their mind at the same time. And I could see where their jaw is locked, or I can see where their eyes are super fixed, or where their back is hyper arched, or if they're holding tension in their shoulders, and then we'll invite them to kind of bring attention to that part of their body and go through somatic work, essentially,
Yeah.
to bring relaxation, to find that fluid movement with the horse, because what I'm trying to do is help their traumatized brain or stuck brain
Mhm.
engage in a fully integrated way through movement. And I watched you work with this particular young woman, and you're doing like the same thing. It's just not called mental health or equine assisted therapy. And I'm like, oh, this is so fascinating, because this is the blend of where our riders, our equestrians in the saddle are stuck,
Yeah.
in their bodies. And then I remember you kind of looked at me, and there was this moment where we sort of had this little conversation about like, this is like your field as opposed to my field. But no, when you're a trainer and you're helping horses and riders, there is some of this heart mind
Absolutely. And
stuff.
one of my like joke statements, so, when I was over in England and got to sit right next to Carl Hester on a bench, and when he realized that, I was an American and we had mutual trainer friends, and, a trainer that I rode with in the United States, he knew, and we're chatting, and he goes, well, teaching Americans is 50% riding, 50% therapy. And it's like, yeah, it is. And it's probably for you guys too. Like I've taught, a couple lessons in England that I'm like, the Brits, it's the same for the Brits. And,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
no, it is. And it's, I think that's where trainers have to like remember that like we have the privilege to give clients that space. And yes, like we may not be even remotely qualified to deal with some things that people have told me, but like you have to be just like a passionate human. Like I've, heard stories or seen myself too. I had a lot of fear jumping. My horse dumped me left and right. I was told a lot of times to suck it up in, different riding classes and riding lessons. I walked out when I was a teenager, I walked out of a clinic with a college that I had a free ride to because he was trying to get me to go over jumps with my young horse and I didn't want to. He wasn't ready. And that was like one of the first times that I was like, oh, wait, I am my horse's biggest advocate. And it's not that I can't trust trainers, but like I can't trust everybody to be the biggest advocate for my horse. I knew that my 5-year-old, or I think Tristan might have been even 4 at that point. I knew that my 4-year-old should not be jumping 2.6, 2.9. Like I didn't want that. So, but yeah, like I personally, with the jumping especially, I remember, the bad experiences, of course, but the good does stand out. And I was, doing a lesson with Steph, the centered riding trainer that's basically become one of my close mentors. And she knew that I had the jumping challenges. And she looked at me and she goes, I want you to just do whatever you're comfortable with today. And I was like, I'm comfortable with everything, Steph. Like, this is awesome. Like, and like my little, I don't know, 20-year-old brain was like, oh no, like you've made me feel so comfortable. I'm going to do it all. And I did. And it's just that one sentence from her that was like, do what you're comfortable with. And that's carried over. Like, when I have lessons, especially with new people, I say to them, like, this exercise is going to be very hard. I expect you to feel like you're going to fail or flop or be challenged. Like, I want to see your challenges. I don't want to see perfection. And I think especially in like clinic scenarios, people go, I spent a lot of money on the clinician. I must be perfect. Like, I kind of don't mind if I see you at your worst because it's going to happen if I'm there or not. So let's make it so that you can survive on your own in whatever scenario. And when it comes to like some of like the more like therapy sides of it, I've seen so many times where people get emotional for whatever reason with a horse. And, the trainer says, suck it up, go do blah, blah, blah. And I remember in another centered riding lesson, when I was getting my level 1 certification, she did a psoas release on me. And at the time, I didn't know what the psoas was and whatnot. And I remember I was on a horse that was, I had been training for a couple of years. I brought him down to Virginia with me. He had a really, really nice trot and he was working up the levels, but something was stuck. So she did the psoas release and I'm trotting around and Jack is like just doing this big expressive trot. And I'm like, oh, we're on to something. And then all of a sudden I'm like, why do I feel like I need to cry? And everybody apparently that's watching me was like, what's going on with Kendra? Like, they could see things and I'm just sitting there like trotting around happy as can be. But then all of a sudden just like, I feel super emotional. Like what I'm thinking about my father and my father was abusive and that has been stored in my body. Now I know what I know. I've done a lot of work in progress with that and horses helped, especially when I was like, 10 years old and didn't realize what Kim was doing with me. And she knew more than I knew she knew type deal because of my mom. But I'm with this and like trotting around thinking about my dad and having this wild experience. And afterwards, when we're all talking, the trainer, Judy, she's like, what was going on there if you feel comfortable sharing? And I'm like, I was thinking about my dad. Like, I have no idea. I don't think about my dad when I ride. Like, I was too busy playing with this trot. And she's like, it was your psoas, like your psoas stores trauma. And, she invited me to learn more about TRE, trauma and stress release exercises, which I've done. And it's helped me a ton with the PTSD. So I do a lot of the kind of psoas type work with my riders and explain to them, like, if and when you have emotions, you can share whatever, you can stand in the corner, you can do anything that you need to process. You can, tell me how to help you. I'm not a therapist, but, if you start rambling and saying things, I will do the best I can. And I promise to like not judge you or, close down the space. Just know that I'm not a therapist, so I might not say the right thing, but I will do my best. And I had that experience with a rider who was extremely, had a tough psoas and had an experience that I'm not going to go into detail here, but it was a big, big traumatic experience. And she just blurted it out. And I was like, okay, we're just going to walk and we're just going to float it out. And I did all this imagery and I'm just internally, I'm like, oh my God, this is terrifying because like, I don't know what to say right now, but if like, you're just a compassionate human and being like, it's not that everything's okay, but just being like, you're safe And like
Yeah.
the power of just saying you're safe. And, you know, I'm here, I'm not going to do anything, like it's
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
safe.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
been really cool to like almost develop too. And I have like, you know, a couple younger riders and anybody, honestly, of all different ages.
Yeah.
I had, especially with the simulator, like I had somebody recently that got on the simulator and it wasn't moving, but it's still a horse-shaped object. And she had a bad fall in her past, and she was nervous just sitting on the not moving
Yes.
simulator. And we discussed about how like you can get a nervous system injury just no different than a broken bone. So it's
Mm-hmm.
been fascinating to see like how these people, how these riders are looking at themselves differently and realizing that like that trainer that barked at them when they were 15 years old, well, now they're 40 and they get to choose where they're spending their money and who they want
Yeah.
in their space and whatnot. And it's, you know, cool to be a trainer that's like, I'm like, yeah, like I believe in if you like, I know you personally
Mm.
are like the religious based and whatnot. Great. Whatever works for you. I'm more like the energy work and I work with an energy specialist that connects to me. Like do
Mm-hmm.
what connects to you so that you can, you know, do this journey. Like being a human's hard, surviving the horse world's hard. And
Harder.
yeah. And then there's
Yeah.
also the horses. So
Right. Well,
yeah,
go back for a second. Define what the SOAS is, because I know that there are people listening that they're like,
yeah.
what is she talking about?
So the SOAS, and for anybody who wants to look it up, it's spelled PSOAS,
Mm-hmm.
PSOAS. So it is your innermost core muscle, which is responsible for your fight, flight, or freeze. It's also where we store trauma. So like if you've ever been in a situation of an argument or an accident or just anything stressful and you feel like your body needs to shake, but we then live in this world where we say, no, you must be tough, don't show emotions, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
bad ideas. You tell that shaking not to happen, it just stores deeper and deeper into the psoas. And it's all, you know, that's your hormones that tell you, hey, the cougar's coming, you are at heart a deer, run. And you know,
Mm-hmm.
the deer runs away and processes through all the shaking, but you're standing next to the cougar because maybe you're in an abusive relationship at home and you can't leave the cougar. So
Mm-hmm.
you then store all of this in your psoas and it just piles up and up and up and gets into, you know, almost you can think like tighter, more concrete internally. And the
Mm-hmm.
muscle itself does change. So, you know, you might have hip pain that could just be your psoas is extremely tight, or the psoas is connected to your diaphragm. So maybe you have challenges with your breathing when you're anxious or panic attacks, whatever, that your psoas just doesn't let your diaphragm swing up and down enough to say, hey, we're going to breathe in a relaxed manner versus a manner that's ready to run away from the cougar. So it's really fascinating. Your dog has a psoas, your horse does. It's a really hard muscle to palpate because it
Mm-hmm.
is so deep. And if you do palpate it, it can be pretty painful.
Mm-hmm.
And with some of the work, you know, I personally like the TRE method, but there's tons of different modalities and like tools that you can use. But you do, when you release it, you'll lose control of your emotions. So the
Mm-hmm.
biggest psoas release I ever had, I was 1 millisecond, I'm laughing my butt off. The next, I'm word vomiting about my father and, you know, crying, giggling, all these things. And for
Mm-hmm.
me personally, and I'm very open about all of my mental health journey because I think then there's everybody can relate and I want somebody to hear my story and feel better about theirs. So my father was abusive and, you know, for years and years, if I heard the tit 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 of a belt, even after we left and after he passed away, I would flinch. And
Mm-hmm.
one session with TRE and that went away. And it's like
Wow.
one of those things I cannot explain enough.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like voodoo, but it's so not. And
Mm-hmm.
like I always tell my clients, I'm like, just try it once, like just
Mm-hmm.
amuse me. And like, and if you don't like it, if it doesn't connect with you, okay, like I got a list of other things for you to try.
Yeah.
But it's been amazing to see, like, you know, I have people that, you know, use the TRE method or my energy worker or all the other collection of modalities and professionals that they go, oh, like I get it now. And like,
Yeah.
and it's amazing too when like I have a rider, especially at clinics, that I'm like, you know, you don't have to tell me anything, but this is a psoas thing. This has nothing to do with riding. And, you know,
Yeah.
it's amazing that when the riders do open up and they're like, you know, well, I had this happen when I was a kid, or this relationship I just left. And it's like, yeah, like if you work on that and work on yourself, you will feel it in your riding. And there's things we can do to make it so that you don't feel like you're getting left behind in your riding. But sometimes, and I tell them too, I'm like, I want it to be an us problem. Like, we speak English, we don't need to call the vet. Like, you
Yes.
can do the homework.
Yes.
Versus if it's a horse lameness challenge or soundness challenge, like, we got to figure out which practitioner we need and x-rays
Yes.
and spend a lot of money guessing.
Yeah. I've
So
got a great example of that I'm currently going through.
yeah.
Because you described the TRE method, which I'm not familiar with,
Mhm.
but and even with the psoas and like the energy work, like it just makes me think about like The Body Keeps the Score by
Yes.
Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Like,
Yep.
and so however you want to look at it, whether you're thinking that this is locked up in your psoas, or if you think that this is locked up in your brainstem and that amygdala,
Mhm.
survival system, the reality is like, as especially Americans, we're very cognitive and we're very visual.
Yeah.
So we look for what we see and we look for how we solve, but we don't necessarily pay attention at what we somatically feel and emotionally feel. Those are like brain over here is a separate little thing and body is over here. And the problem is it's all in one literal shell. Like,
Yeah.
we have to know what's happening inside. And I've recorded some wellness tips about this, but I'll go a little bit more in depth. I'm having issues with my horse at the mounting block outside the arena. He walks off. He doesn't ever do that inside the arena unless I'm totally dysregulated.
Yeah.
And happened a couple times and I'm like, okay, where am I scared? Where am I hesitating? What is happening here? I'm trying to evaluate it from a nervous system perspective. Like, do I have a nervous system trauma, like you said, that I'm unaware of? And is that contributing to this? Because why would he loves riding outside of the arena. So I can kind of rule out that it's not a pain issue with him and it's not a preference issue because he's like ready to get going.
Yeah.
And he's not diving for grass I've tried it in different locations. So the reality is I started working on this with my therapist,
Mhm.
right? And she said, so like, what's going on? I said, I notice a hesitation to put my foot in the stirrup. There's something that is a block. I'm not fluid.
Yep.
And she's like, well, what are you thinking? Right. And I'm like, well, I really don't want to fall on my tailbone.
Mhm.
And she said, when have you fallen on your tailbone? I'm like, I've had a few riding accidents that have injured my tailbone. And the worst tailbone injury was literally I was on a trail walking with my family and slipped on the footing and landed. My tailbone hit the root in the ground. And I was out of commission for a long time. And so I know physical pain from the tush fall. And that is holding me back. And she said, well, what else might be in there? Like, can you rewind? And what came up was my cousin, when I was a kid, broke her back in a trail riding incident with my
Yeah.
uncle. I was not there. I didn't get to see her when she was in the hospital. But I knew where she was. I knew how hard it would be to get out of that situation with her injury. And I knew what ensued in her life afterwards, post injury.
Yeah.
And this was so interesting. My therapist said this to me, which I intuitively know, but couldn't apply to myself, which is why we need
Mhm.
other professionals to help us,
Oh
regardless
yeah.
of who we are. And she's like, so your body at 14 internalized massive amounts of trauma around that situation. You visually walked through what you never saw, and your body made a mental note that this particular situation's unsafe.
Mhm.
And if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to go X, Y, and Z. So fast forward to now, I say I want to be a trail rider. And yet the amount of energy shift in me that happens is actually reflective by the hesitation to even get in the saddle.
Yeah. And that's where all of this is just so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where like we need to think about how the nervous system impacts everything.
Yes. Yes, everything. And so, the way I'm going to deal with it is I'm taking like a holistic approach. So we're going to use EMDR and therapy for it and go back to that touch point and see if I could unlock what got stuck, right? Don't cry, don't feel, don't think, whatever. Unlock that, shift the cognitive thought around it from this is not safe, I might get hurt, to a positive, which I don't know what that would be yet, but it will come. And then also like a little bit of exposure therapy with the support of a trainer or a friend. So I'm not going to try to get on his back in that setting by myself. I'm going to bring a support system around me and just do it over and over again until the technique in that space becomes fluid.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that
What
too,
else
like,
would you add to that?
so, depending on what type of like condolences or rewards or something like that too, that like, you hop on and, somebody's, standing there with you, you might need them to hold onto your horse and you to literally say to yourself, I am safe, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you need, outside perspective, have them be like, you are safe, you are okay. Or you pet your horse so that you can feel like he's just hanging out. Like,
Yeah.
his energy is saying, reflecting to you of you're safe, you're okay. And,
Mm-hmm.
you can even like, as silly as it is, sometimes people, it's like they need the reward of just like a pat on their shoulder that's like, I did well. Because I think so many
Mm-hmm.
times we say my horse did well. It's like, yes, they did, but it's because you who, moved your hand. So actually a good example. And this client is more than happy for me to share her story. So I have a client who had a stroke and
Mm-hmm.
it was like 3, 4 years ago. She was an accomplished hunter jumper rider and her name's Judy, which is important because we have a metaphor, a trick for this. So Judy knows to keep her hands where they need to be. And she knows how to ride horses and she has a lovely guy that, he's super, super safe and understanding. And sometimes her hands will just go rogue, especially her left hand. And she would beat herself
Mm-hmm.
up. And I'm like, well, that's the stroke. So we named the stroke Judith. And Judith sometimes needs to go sit in the corner. Judith, we've sent on vacation, we've sent her to run errands. Like, we make sure that Judith is nowhere around. And I was talking with one of the Franklin Method trainers about this. And then she was like, can I borrow Judith? I'm like, absolutely. So that week I go to the barn and I'm like, hey, for the record, Judith is over in Seattle. And Judy's like, she is? I'm like, great. She's not around here. And she had a phenomenal week because then she just stopped beating herself up. So like, sometimes it's like, in your type of situation, it might be like, okay, I got on, I conquered Mount Rushmore or, Mount
Mm-hmm.
Rainier. That, if you make it into this like visual of like, big, huge thing, you ran your marathon. I'm so proud of myself for running my marathon because we think of mounting and dismounting as just like very basic, which just because something's very basic doesn't mean it's very easy.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and
Yeah.
back to the mounting and dismounting too, I have a lot of older clients that we work on mounting and dismounting.
Yes.
And one of them at the farm, we have a vaulting barrel and, I go to swing on and I'm grunting and groaning because I'm not flexible enough and I have the hip this and the hip that. And she just looks at him, she's like, oh, well, you need this lesson as much as I do. And I'm like, that's correct. That we also, I think we put professionals on pedestals where at the end of the day, like, no different than an adult amateur, except for I figured out how to get you guys to pay me. Like,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
put
Yeah.
all the hours into the education, but my nervous system is still an adult amateur. And
Right.
so, I want everybody to see that it's all relatable. So, and to yours too, my
Mm-hmm.
horse dumped me left and right when I was in high school at the mounting block. And,
Yeah.
one day I opened up my eyes and all I saw was belly. And I was like, well, this is how this happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so to that, like every time I sit on a new horse, I am nervous. And
Yeah.
it's been 20 years since like, well, not quite 15 years, let's say, since like the
Mm-hmm.
last time he dumped me getting on. I also learned the importance of saddle fit and cold backed horses at the early age of like, 15.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
as you should. So yeah, and it's like also remembering that you as the adult amateur, like you're not alone, and
Mm-hmm.
like you work with others that have these types of challenges, but most of the, our clients aren't therapists, and or, in my profession, they are just in their bubble thinking, oh, but
That's
I'm
right.
struggling in my own little bubble. Like, no, the bubble's big.
Yeah.
And to that too, a little bit, the amount of times I have clients come to me and they're like, my horse has XYZ, I have XYZ. I hope this isn't too much of a problem. And I'm like, oh, this is just a Tuesday for me.
Yeah.
Like, no,
Yeah.
like I've give me something I haven't seen so I can be creative. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
that creative piece is the important piece. I'm working with a client who had not only a severe riding accident, but an injury that took her out for a long time. And she is struggling to get to ride again. And just in brainstorming where it's safe. And I don't want to keep myself in a job, but I do. You know what I mean? Like I can help you do this. You can
Yeah.
help people do this. But also our communities, we need to be advocates to find our communities to help us do this. And
Yeah.
so with this particular gal, I said to her, well, I think the issue is just the change in elevation, because she described another situation of walking and the change of elevation. So we brainstormed, and I came up with a whole plan of incrementally getting her nervous system and her muscle awareness used to changes in elevation by just working on steps at home. And
Yeah.
then her husband got her or built her like a home mounting block
Yeah.
so she could practice on at home. And then her trainer sounds just amazing and is like coming alongside her using like whatever we're talking about together, because we're like up and down the East Coast apart from each other.
Yeah.
And I said, is there, to the point of the vaulting thing, I said, is there someplace you could throw a saddle over a barrel or a hay bale or something and just like get in that saddle, and could you stand in the saddle and sit in the saddle with nothing else moving? And that one exercise was like what she needed to regulate her nervous system and give her more confidence. I should say more, multiple exercises, but she
Yeah.
needed the person on the ground to also support her and remind her that injury was then. And in
Mhm.
the counseling world, especially like trauma work, we say that was then, but this is now.
Yeah.
And you are safe in the here and now. That was then, notice that, and then put it in that container like you're describing. Judith is what we would call a container
Yeah.
exercise. You're visualizing the departure of the thing that is stressful so you can be in the here and now.
Yeah.
Um, that's amazing. Well, we have been like chatting a while here. We need to start wrapping up. We probably can do part two easily. We need to probably do part two because we didn't even talk about the simulator. So
Yeah.
describe that really quick,
Sure.
and then
Uh,
where people can find you as well. Make sure you say that.
Yeah. So the simulator is a racewood eventing simulator, known as Blue. Her owner found me, and it's been like, it was like at first sight for everybody, which is amazing. She's wonderfully supportive. So with the simulator, she does walk track canter. She does all the Grand Prix moves technically, but it's kind of like a video game. We don't do that as much. And she jumps. So I can have riders in basically anything that they can conquer type deal. And with it, I can hold on to you as you're jumping or band you up in ways that are just bluntly very dangerous on a horse. The risk of falling off is basically zero. You do have to wear your helmet, but it's more for dismounting when your legs are a little like, woo, I worked for the last hour. So with it, I do all of the Franklin method modalities, centered riding, and like everything I've just kind of created.
Mhm.
And it's just an amazing tool that makes it so that like we can really 110% focus on the rider. And there's times where I am the only one that controls the horse. You don't even have reins. I push the buttons. There's different rein setups that I can do. So we can break down anything, and we can practice things as if you're on a piece of gym equipment instead of a real horse that would, tattle on you or get upset with you. There's plenty of times where I'll be like, okay, like squeeze with your legs as hard as you absolutely can. And people are like, but I'm on a horse. I'm like, no, you're on a piece of gym equipment. Like it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's been a huge shift in the business and a huge shift in like everybody's success. Especially too, like I had a rider who's been with me for a couple of years now, and we went and did like 15 minutes on the simulator to just cue a canter kind of series of aids that our horse needed. And we like rushed back to the barn, got the horse warmed up and tacked up, and was like, okay, we're going into the canter. And I could just say this one word, which meant like 15 minutes worth of discussion, and bam, she got it, and we moved on, and they're doing fantastic. So that is located near the Bucks County Horse Park in Kittnersville, PA. I do lessons. They're all private hour or workshops. I really, really enjoy working with trainers and like kind of co-teaching depending on what we're up to. Like I had a rider whose right foot was basically shut down and she couldn't feel into her left seat bone. So the trainer knew all the horse's specific aids for the half pass. And yes, the machine didn't like position herself into a half pass. So we kind of played pretend a little bit. And the trainer managed the half pass cueing, and then I managed the foot. And the rider was like, oh my God, there's my left foot or my left seat bone. Like, where has it been? So, and at the simulator studio, I have a bunch of stuff that will do work on the ground to the mounting and dismounting. I actually, my husband made me a wooden stand, which is great, but then I want more, and I'm, exploring things. So at the Horse Expo, there's the fiberglass stands that you see at like a tack shop. So I bought 2 of them so that my riders can practice stretching and mounting and dismounting and all these things. So yeah, I want to keep just building. My brain is constantly shifting gears. I want to see about doing some like almost like athletic type classes on these horseless stands. So that because riding is a very specific, muscles that we have to use. So yeah, I do the simulator's the big thing. I travel for clinics where I bring the horse safe gear. And we got some clinics coming up in a few places in Maryland. I think I just booked another one, but I don't remember where that is. But I loved going to other barns. And especially again, like trainers, you can follow me around. Like the trainers, I know that you're going to do the homework with the riders. So ask me all the questions. I want to be seen as like the math tutor, especially in this industry that's so insanely competitive. Like I love my group of ladies. I'm almost too busy. I do not self-regulate my work-life balance at all, as my therapist would tell me. But like, I think a lot of people get worried of, clients leaving when we do, especially things so close to, the other trainers and territories and whatnot. And it's like, yeah, I just always want trainers to know, like, I just want to help the horses technically. Your riders, of course, but it really is for the horses. And that's what's cool about the simulator too, is that like, you can, flop around and do whatever, and like you're very much not going to hurt a horse as much as you think you might, because she is horse shaped and she does make horse noises.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to book a session and come on down and try it out for myself so that there's like a legit testimony in it. But I trust you. I trust that it's powerful. And I've talked about at Concordia Stables, which is where I'm based out of, we have a spring horse,
Yes.
Joker. And I have physically felt what you have described in terms of like a keyword and feeling it and then being able to translate that back into the saddle. But on Joker, it's trot, it's posting trot, and it's canter. There are so many more complex things that you can do on the simulator that I think would be really, really important for people to at least have a one-time experience and then be able to like take that back and make this part of their physical, emotional development as an equestrian. I think yeah, I think for the sake of the horses, because you're right. How many times are we being told kick them on, make them bend, send them forward, put them in the channel, ask them to do X, Y, and Z. And we're like thinking, I think I'm doing that, but the body isn't doing what the brain is telling it to do. And we need to find out that the problem is locked up in us in order to help our horse. It's not fair to keep on asking them to do something that they're reading our cues exactly
Yeah.
as we're sending them forth,
Absolutely. And, to one of your statements of just kick them forward, as you're walking to any of these, our listeners, try to walk and kick at the same time, and you will feel a joint lock up. There's no way to kick and, keep your hips flowing accurately and evenly with the horse. So, I have to always chuckle when, my horse is lazy. When I kick, he doesn't move. Well, your hips don't move, and he's going to listen to your hips first. So, and it's amazing to watch people go, oh, I guess I don't have to work as hard on horses. Like, no, like,
No,
so
you just need to move with them. And yeah, I've learned so much of that with Kodiak, my boy.
yeah.
He has taught me. And so on this closing note, why don't you tell us, what do you think it means to be a liberated equestrian?
So I think it means to like kind of what I've thought of all my professional journey. I've been having my business for 10 years is to be the black sheep and to be happy about it. When I first started out, I had a lot of trainers and people talking down on me saying that I, was doing the voodoo stuff. And it's like, okay, that's their opinion. I'm liberated in the fact of I stand by what I believe and what I'm doing. And I have, the clients that are very loyal and faithful and, see the merit in listening to me. So it's just being like liberated to like know that the classics are there for a reason, but the classics doesn't mean that they're right. And that just because somebody tells you and they, went to the Olympics or they're this accomplished, blah, 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 doesn't mean it's correct and doesn't mean that it's right for the horses. And that like you are liberated enough to look at all facets and take things that are non-equestrian, such as TRE and therapy. A therapist that doesn't even know, has never touched a horse, can still help you in the horse space. And just being liberated to like look outside of the box, and to question everything. And I tell people all the time, like, hear what I say and go make sure that like fact check me. Go ask another, physical therapist or another biomechanics trainer. And to that too, like, just because somebody says there's something, sadly don't trust them. Like, this is where I sound a little rude is, the biomechanics is the buzzword right now. And it has been for the last couple of years. And it's understanding, like, does somebody have the certifications and the knowledge and the resume to say that they are a biomechanics specialist and they do understand the way that the human and horse body moves, versus just saying, I bought the bands, so I'm a biomechanics trainer. And like, because it is all of these products can be purchased on Amazon. And, this is my like quick little rant that the Franklin balls come off of Amazon with too much air in them. So if you haven't been trained in them, you're not going to use them right. And you're not going to you could end up harming yourself, the horses, or a rider. So it's, making sure that you are checking us, interviewing us as much as we want to interview you to make sure that we want you as a client. Ask around and I guess be liberated enough to like challenge me. I love it when a client comes with me saying, I heard this or I read this, and it contradicts what you told me. Great, let's talk about all the sides of it. And us as professionals not being offended, like, and to have healthy conversations that might be uncomfortable. So yeah, I guess I'd say I'm liberated in the fact of like, I'll be a black sheep happily in many, many facets of the horse world. And I enjoy my little spot in where I'm at in the horse world.
Yeah. And I'm glad you're there. I'm glad we've connected because we share a passion for that, right? Like
Yeah.
and I say to my clients and students in Finding Calm, like, you need to create your own theory of horsemanship and
Yeah.
humanship. Like at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you are the only one that is inside your brain and your heart and your body, and you've got to figure out what is congruent and authentic to you. And so, go do your research, listen to different ideas, and be willing to say, that doesn't quite resonate with me, but I like this part and I can embrace it, right?
Yeah.
And help myself, help my horse, help the humans I'm doing life with, and go forward with that.
Yeah.
So where can
Absolutely
people
agree.
find you?
So on Instagram and Facebook, it's K Clarke Equine, Clarke with an E, and kclarkeequine.com. I'm revamping the website with my wonderful website lady to show more about the simulator. Best way to reach me is through email and through the website, and you can sign up for like the newsletter that I'm always behind on. And yeah, it's, you can book workshops and clinics, come visit. I have, very limited kind of wait list for the actual lessons on the horses, and have more availability for the simulator. The horses are located in New Jersey, just right on the river. So it's a nice place for a weekend adventure with some rider friends. But yeah, it's just K Clarke with an E, equine.
Love it. Well, thank you, Kendra, for being on
Yeah,
today. I'm
thank
sure
you.
I'm going to have you back for more conversations.
I'm
I
thrilled.
Good. I appreciate you. And thank you everyone for listening to today's episode of the Liberated Equestrian Podcast. I hope that this has equipped you to go be liberated in your horsemanship and your humanship. See you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberated Equestrian Podcast. I'm so grateful to have you as a part of this community. If you loved today's episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your fellow equestrians. Be sure to join our Patreon community at patreon.com/liberatedequestrian, where you'll be able to connect with fellow equestrians and get access to after-show content as well as exclusive coaching and downloadable resources. For more information, resources, show notes, you can visit stableminded.us and the Liberated Equestrian. Together, let's live as liberated equestrians. The Liberated Equestrian Podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The content shared in each episode, including discussions, interviews, and advice, reflects the personal opinions and professional insights of the host and guest. The information provided on this podcast is not a substitute for professional mental health care, counseling, or therapy. Listeners should consult a licensed healthcare professional for specific advice regarding their personal situations. Reliance on any information provided by this podcast is solely at the listener's discretion and risk. While every effort is made to provide accurate and up-to-date information, neither Lisa Pulliam nor the Liberated Equestrian Podcast assumes any responsibilities for errors, omissions, or outcomes resulting from the use of this information. By listening to this podcast, you agree that neither the host, guest, or affiliated party shall be held liable for any damages, loss, or harm arising from the use or misuse of the information presented. If you are experiencing a mental health emergency, please seek immediate assistance from a qualified healthcare provider or call your emergency services in your area. Thank you for listening to the Liberated Equestrian Podcast.